New details are emerging about what may have contributed to the deadly plane crash in South Korea last month that killed all but two of the 181 people on board. Here to go over the plane crash report in further detail is the CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation, Hassan Shahidi. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
All right, so the initial report has now confirmed there were traces of bird remains in the plane's engine. So tell us a little bit more about what that might mean about the cause of the crash.
Right, and so this is a very important now report coming out. It actually identifies the type of bird through DNA analysis. It is actually a large migratory duck that nests around waterways around the Muan airport. These are very large, and what happens at high speed when it strikes the engine, it breaks the fan blade inside the engine and can destroy the engine. It turns out that both engines show signs of bird strike. So this is a very important piece of information, and the investigators are going to be looking into other pieces of information as well.
Hassan, could this be the main cause of the crash, though? And if so, is that not concerning considering the odds of birds being in an aircraft's vicinity are pretty high?
Well, many airports around the world that do have these migratory birds do have countermeasures to make sure that these birds are not flying at the time when the aircraft are approaching. One of the questions that the investigators will be looking at is what countermeasures were being implemented during the time of the approach of this airplane.
Well, the report also mentioned that the plane's black boxes stopped recording about 4 minutes before the crash. So what could be the reason for that? And besides the birds hitting the engines, what could be some of the other reasons for this crash here?
Well, the engines power the airplane electricity. So the fact that the black boxes stop recording, the explanation is that the engines malfunctioned. They were not producing power, and therefore those black boxes were not really recording any of the information. And that is a significant challenge for the investigators because having that data, having that information, the pilot conversation would have been an important piece of the information as to what were the decisions the pilots were making at a very critical time.
Now, I think it's still it's unclear in terms of the landing gear not being deployed, but it's my understanding from some of the reports that I have read, the pilot decided that because they noticed that there were birds in the area, that may have been one of the reasons that they didn't deploy the landing gear. Does that make sense? Is that something that could lead us to understanding more about why the plane crashed?
Well, it is not clear whether that was a pilot decision not to deploy it, or in fact, the landing gear was not working. That is one of the things that the investigators will be looking at. The other thing that they will be looking at is the pilots decided to land at the opposite end of the runway that they were assigned to. That's one of the questions they'll be asking, why did they choose to do that? And so as the investigators continue, they'll be looking at all of these factors, including the wall at the end of the runway.
And that's why I wanted to ask you about that concrete barrier, the wall that was at the end of the runway when the plane sort of slid and then crashed into it. It's my understanding that that concrete structure held something called a localizer. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what exactly a localizer is, and is this something that needs to be looked at and perhaps maybe redesigned or relocated at the airport?
Well, these are antennas that help the plane guide the plane to the airport. And so at the end of runways, these antennas are installed. However, as it turns out, the way in which these were installed were in violation of international standards. These installations need to be frangible, meaning that in the event that there is a collision with the aircraft, that they are supposed to easily come off. Well, in this case, clearly, this was a concrete wall that really resulted in the fatalities of 179 people.
All right, Hassan, we've been doing a lot of stories, covering stories of plane crashes lately. It just the perception that there seems to be more cases happening. Are these actually quite rare overall, and flight safety is at its highest since the start of, planes being passenger planes for people to get from one place to the other? Or is safety being compromised here? Does more need to be done in the airline industry?
Well, anytime things like this happen, there is concern. But in 2023, there were 0 jet fatalities. In 2024, we're on our way to repeat the record until December. So I think it's important to note that we have a very safe air transportation system globally. 4 billion people traveled in 2024. And we have trained pilots that are doing their jobs very well, air traffic controllers that are doing their jobs very well. But it's also important to note that there are risks, and it's important to understand what happened in this particular case and make sure it doesn't happen again.
All right, Hassan, we really appreciate your time and insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is Hassan Shahidi, CEO of the Flight Safety Foundation.